Welcome to the podcast, Business Secrets from Our Millionaire Dad.
Yes, thank you guys. We've got myself, Randal Davidson, and my daughter, Sierra, and my daughter, Bre.
Hello.
Bre, by the way, we're coming up on her birthday. She's going to be how old?
28?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, my birthday's tomorrow.
28 years old. That is pretty crazy
Crazy.
to think about having a 28-year-old daughter, the youngest, your youngest baby.
I was talking to Mom about that. I'm like, how do you feel that 28 years ago you had your last baby? 28. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. And I feel like life just keeps getting better the older I get. Can you confirm, Dad? Because I mean, I am only 34, but I feel it. I'm wiser.
Absolutely. And as long as you look at each day as a gift, it is absolutely amazing. So what a great thing. Well, guys, let's talk a little bit about money. Now that we've got projections and we've got our end in mind set up, we figured out our strategies and our exit strategies, then it's time to start figuring out how we're going to get money to get started. Before I get too far into that, I want to remind everybody, especially you guys, there is something called the golden rule of lending. Have you guys heard of the golden rule?
I've heard
I
of a
haven't.
few golden rules, but I don't think it has to do with lending.
Yeah.
Well, the golden rule of lending is something I learned long ago, and it is so true. The golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules, period.
Okay.
I thought that'd be a little more like
That's it.
profound or creative. That's it.
Yeah.
All
He who
right.
has the gold makes the rules. They're the ones that are making the decisions, and they're the ones that are deciding to give you money or not. So there are several ways to start getting money for your business. And most of them require that you've got good credit. So guys, we want to talk about credit in the future and how to get there. Get your credit where it needs to be. But having good credit is going to be essential for a lot of these options. Not all of them. In fact, the one thing, back to our first episode of vision, if your vision's strong enough, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Credit doesn't have to be the number two priority. It's just that money does, right? So that means you got to get more creative, and we're going to talk about that. So basically, there are 7 ways that we can build business, get some money for our business. A lot of them have to have good credit required, others don't. But there are 7 that I put down as possible ways to do that. Number 1 is savings. Number 2 is your credit cards. Number 3 is an SBA loan. Number 4 is going to your local bank. 5, HELOC, getting a line of credit on your house. 6, creative financing. That includes seller financing or credit line stacking, any of those kind of things. And then the bank of love. And I want to address each one of those. So let's just go right down them and the reasons why you'd use them and the reasons why you would not use them. Number 1 is savings. If you're going to do savings, the big challenge you're going to run into there is that it's a limited resource. So if you have $100,000 or $50,000 available money that you saved away, or you've got a 401k with $100,000 or something in it, and you use that money, then when you're done, it's gone. It's finished. It's gone. And that's a pretty big risk. You're adding risk to your venture because of the fact that that could very well be your nest egg. So that's the downside, is it's limiting. The positive is it's easy to get. You could use that same savings account as a leverage, because when you're going to a bank, and we're going to talk about bank financing in a minute, but if you're going to go to a bank and you're going to borrow money and take out a loan, and they see that you've got $100,000 or $50,000 or $200,000 in your account, they're going to see that as their way of knowing you're going to be able to pay it. So without having to put it up for collateral, it's called a compensating factor. They're going to look at that as a reason why they're willing to lend you money. So it actually makes you more bankable to not use your savings and you're more bankable to use other people's money and keep your money safe and secure in a regular account so that you can leverage off of it. If you think about it, you could get more than one loan and leverage that same $100,000 sitting in the bank account or that same $50,000 sitting in the bank account over and over again because each bank is going to look at that as your ATR, your ability to repay those loans. Okay, the second option that you could use is, of course, your current credit cards. The challenge with existing credit cards is that right now, the average credit card in America, the interest rate is 29.9%.
Ouch.
So,
Bree's not even that old.
Yikes.
28.
not even 1% for every year that you were alive. So, that means that basically just under 30% of your costs are going to be literally spent on interest. So it's a pretty heavy price to pay. And here's the other thing. It takes the average American 21 years to pay off a credit card. So when you get started on that credit card and you start going down that road, you got to be prepared for long term, even though you don't want to, but because the interest rate's so high, it takes so long to pay it off. I would not necessarily do that, but there are several stories of several companies who started their businesses using credit cards. Happens a lot. In fact, it happens so often because those are the easiest ways to get capital and use other people's money. As long as your credit's good, you got to have a 680 score or higher. But if you do, and of course, the higher the score, the better the rates and all the terms. But if you do, you got to be prepared. That to me, those credit cards are a double-edged sword. It's got a positive, it's got a negative, and you got to be okay with it.
I feel like too, if you're obviously using your own credit cards that you already have, then you also have to be aware of the limits that you have on those cards and then your usage, right? Because that's obviously going to affect your credit. So if you're maxing out all of your credit cards that you currently have, that is going to affect your credit.
Right. And the thing about it is having capital to build your businesses. Like I say, you're going to hear story after story after story of people that have used their credit cards to do that. Now, we've got a creative way to actually add to that and make that a better solution. But in the meantime, that is one of our options. Another option that you have is you can go to the SBA. That's the Small Business Administration. The government right now, they actually are offering SBA loans that are easier to get than trying to go get venture capital, which I didn't even mention venture capital on my list because when you're dealing with venture capitalists, you got to have a pitch deck. All your projections have to be dialed in, and you have to have history that is provable. So I didn't even mention venture capital money in my list or angel investors for that matter, because that is a second layer that is required when you're getting into the bigger commitments where a SBA loan, those small business loans are going to be installment loans. They go out 15 years, 20 years, 30 years sometimes. And they have options for minorities. And think about what a minority is. Of course, racial minorities are one thing. Female is a minority. So if you're a female owned business, that's considered minority. You fit into a category that I personally, as a white male, I don't fit.
Mm.
So it gives you an opportunity to get SBA money. And the great thing about that is it's cheap. SBA money is going to be tied to the Wall Street Journal Federal Reserve rates, the overnight rates. So it's going to be fairly easier to get. The challenge with SBA is they make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed. You got to have a business plan. You got to have tax returns. You got to have all of the necessary requirements to get them to feel comfortable with that. And they have a time constraint. It can take up to 4 months to get you that loan, sometimes
Wow.
longer.
As a woman who has a business, how do I get that?
You got to make sure that the business plan is set out from start to finish with projections and with
Mm.
the plan as far as step number one, we're going to do this marketing. Step number two, we're going to do this marketing. Step number three, we're going to do this. You've got to break it all the way down and have it set up. Now, with that said, is it so difficult it can't be done? No. I've gotten a couple of small business loans in the past. And there are several different ways. The one that we're talking about here, I believe, is called a 504B. So when you go to the SBA website, you can click on that. You can go right in there and see it. Nowadays, SBA is online, so you can get a lot of this information right through the SBA website. I remember one time I logged in and I tried to make a phone call to the SBA, and they said there are 3,000 calls in front of you.
Oh my gosh,
6
that's
hour wait.
crazy.
So it's not necessarily the easiest thing. And right now, where they're cutting government entities, I did just read that they're cutting the staff at the SBA. So it may get harder, not easier. With that said, I
Oh,
don't want you to skim over it because it really is a great option. It's cheap money. It is a great option, especially for a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business, because they want to encourage that. So they're going to actually help you get the answers that you need to get for them. So that's a great thing.
okay. I see.
The next option that I have is local banks. And the reason why I say local banks is because a local community bank, which if you Google community banks, you're going to find there's a bunch of them right around you. They have a mandate to lend to businesses in their specific community. So they have basically a community graph or marker that says a certain amount of their funds need to be lent in that community. So if you walk into a community bank, you can get to know that person. You can tell them about your business. You guys can talk about ways to build the business one on one with a local guy who has the ear of the president of the company who needs to lend in your area. Local banks, by the way, getting a quick $25,000 business credit card is not difficult at all, especially if you've already got established credit. If your credit's good and you've got a bank account there and they've seen money rolling through the account, they're going to easily get you a business credit line. And quite frankly, a business credit card, 25 grand is usually the cap. That's kind of the target mark, which in a lot of cases isn't enough to get you where you need to go, but it can give you a good start. And I would definitely recommend getting that because there's one card right there that you can have access to. Business credit's different from personal credit. We're going to talk about the
Yeah.
difference between a paydex score, which is your business credit. That's specifically attached to your business credit with a personal guarantee. The third option that you can do is a home equity line of credit. The thing about home equity lines of credit is that you have access to the equity in your home. Because it's a line of credit doesn't mean you're taking out a loan for the full amount. Let's say that you've got $100,000 in equity in your house or $150,000 equity in your house. They'll usually safely lend you about 75 to 80% of that. So say you have a home that's worth $100,000, you have a first mortgage that's worth 50. I'm just making things easy. They'll lend you another 25,000. They'll take you up to 75%. So they'll lend you another 25,000 against that, where you keep your first, you get a $25,000 line of credit on your second. Technically, it is a second mortgage. It's a line of credit, even if you don't use it. Those lines of credit you can actually get a checkbook for. So you can write it like as if it was a check. Now, here's the catch. Home equity lines of credit, if you go to a local credit union, if your credit's good enough, they don't necessarily always have to verify your income. As long as your credit's good. If your credit's not so good, they will have to verify that income. It's a hit and miss kind of a thing. But a lot of times, those home equity lines of credit are a good thing. In future episodes, I want to talk about the advantage to establishing a home equity line of credit from the standpoint of asset protection, because you want to protect your assets. If someone's going to try and sue you, those home equity lines of credit are great for that, but we'll talk about that later. On the downside, if you're trying to do a business, you're trying to get started with a business, you got to take a second look at getting a home equity line of credit because of the fact that you're risking your home for this venture.
So with a HELOC, is it a variable rate or is it a fixed rate?
Variable rates. Lines of credit are almost always variable rates. It's a 10-year draw and a 15-year repay, which means
Mm.
you can draw on it for up to 10 years. And then after the 10-year draw is done, you can't draw it anymore. You then start making payments on what's there for the following 15 years.
And HELOCs, they usually have some of the lowest rates, right?
It's a second mortgage, so it does
Yeah.
carry more risk than a first mortgage does.
Uh-huh.
So it's not going to be it's never going to be as cheap as a first mortgage.
Okay.
It's going to be higher because it's a second, meaning it's behind the first lien. If somebody wanted to foreclose on a second, they actually have to foreclose on the first, pay off the first in order to get their money for the second.
That's still cheap money though versus a normal credit card or even an installment loan.
Yep. Okay. The third option that we have is going to be creative financing. And there's two parts of creative financing. The first one is going to be some sort of a seller finance type. So if you're buying a business, and I wanted to touch real quick on the new trend that's coming out called the boring entrepreneur. Boring entrepreneurs are starting to sprout up where they're not trying to start a whole new idea, kind of like what we talked about with the second part of our visions. They're buying boring businesses like all the guys my age are starting to age out of their businesses. So plumbers, electricians, roofers, landscapers, all these guys that have been doing these businesses, they're starting to age out. They want to retire. And a lot of younger generations are realizing they can actually buy somebody else's business that's already running, that's already doing its thing, restaurants, franchises. They can walk into those and take over and immediately have an income right out of the gate. It's a great way to go. People don't realize that's actually pretty simple and easy. You can carry the vision, you can have all the things that you had, and you can actually buy somebody's existing business. I bring that up because creative financing is a huge piece to that. If I walk
Okay.
into and I'm trying to buy a plumbing business, he's going to sell it for $150,000, let's say. I don't have to necessarily come up with 150 grand. He wants to have a good chunk of money down, but I can get creative with the financing. And I can do it a couple ways. If the seller carries, let's say it's 100 grand so we can run the numbers. The seller can carry 25,000 of that, then I could actually go get a SBA loan or a local bank loan for 75,000 because they won't lend on the full amount, but they'll lend on a portion of it. So if they would lend 75,000 and I can get the seller to carry 25,000 as a second type loan, number one, he's going to help me build it and get started for the next couple of years. But number two, it also means that I can walk in with very little money out of pocket. He can win, I can win, and everybody can win.
How
So
are people finding these businesses?
you can actually Google a business broker, and they're all over the place. You want to find a ma and pa restaurant that's ma and pa been there for 30 years and they're just done. Go to a business broker. They're looking for businesses all the time. So they're always going to be looking for ways to get somebody in business and get out those people that are starting to age out. Right now is they're calling it the Great American Turnover because
Mm.
all the baby boomers are aging out and all the young generation is aging in. So now is a great time to be looking for existing businesses where you can step in, where someone has already built clientele, they've already built a reputation, they've already built all the things that are required when you're starting new that you don't necessarily have to always start out new with. Now, you certainly don't want to go buy a video rental business, but you could certainly find a great plumbing business, roofing business, clothing store. If you really wanted a boutique clothing store, man, I'll tell you, it's a good time to be looking. And getting an SBA loan for that, very, very possible, especially if you got the seller financing creative portion with it. You don't have to necessarily come out of pocket big bucks for those kind of things. So the other part of creative financing I wanted to cover is one of the things that we do a lot of, and that is business and personal credit stacking. What that is a new process, relatively new. They have a system with 500 different lenders in there where they can go in and they can get multiple credit lines from multiple banks all at once. Then they stack them one on top of the other like this. And by stacking those, it allows someone to actually spread the risk out over multiple banks. And it allows you to actually get multiple credit cards. And all of them are going to be 0% for 12 to 18 months. And it is a no-brainer for people that are looking to get capital. If they try and do it themselves, you're going to get blocked once you do three of them. You're going to get stopped. They have a way to get you whatever you need. You can get 4 or 5 or 6 credit cards, all at 0% for 12 to 18 months. and get cheap, cheap money without having to go through income verification, without having to go through any of the drama of business plans and all those kind of things, and have access to that capital. It takes about 3 weeks to get it completed. They do charge a fee to build those and put those in place, which is a business expense. We can talk about write-offs and all the advantages to that. You're buying money for your business and it's cheap money.
That already makes more sense than using your existing credit cards because number one, you have to worry about the limits. And number two, you are going to be already paying interest on that money that you're spending right now rather than having those new lines of credit at 0% for a certain period of time.
So true. It's one of those things that makes me go, okay, why wouldn't I do that? Again, it comes down to if I'm not using it, I'm not paying on it, it's available for me. I can stick it all in my desk drawer. I'm not going to go on a cruise with this money. I'm going to use this for business. And at 0%, I got a 12 to 18 month runway to get started. And then I can pay it off. And it's cheap money.
What's the biggest benefit to doing that credit stacking, especially when you're new to the business, you've put it all on paper, you're ready to look into financing options? What's the biggest benefit to doing the credit stacking when you're ready to start your business up?
The greatest part about it is that it is easy to access. Once it's in your hand, it's like I always tell people, don't go into a gunfight with a knife. Don't get started with a business and be undercapitalized. So that money's sitting there available. It does not affect your number one savings account.
Yeah.
It doesn't change your leverage ability to go out and get an SBA loan. It doesn't necessarily affect your ability to leverage that savings account to get additional loans from your local bank. So it becomes an additional option to help you. Now, there is a downside. You end up having to manage 4 or 5 credit cards, business cards, personal cards. They're going to want to get as much business as they can right out of the gate because those don't show up on your personal credit unless you go late. But it does
Okay.
give you the ability to get access to capital right now, even if you don't use it. Go get it, make it available. If you don't have it and you need it, it's too late.
Gotcha. Okay. Quick and easy.
Have it available, have it ready so that when you walk in to any meeting, you're walking in with power because you know you got the money backing you.
Yeah. And it's 0% too. So you can rely on knowing that you're going to hopefully have a plan to pay that back
Yep,
within that 0% interest period.
exactly.
Cool.
All right, last thing is we call it the bank of love. That's calling mom and dad, brother and sister, asking them to help you with loans. Good thing about that, you don't have to verify any income. You don't have to qualify for anything. The downside is you got to see them every Thanksgiving and every Christmas. And it is a big challenge when you owe somebody money for your headspace. Oh, I owe him money. I got to pay him back. Their space. Hey, he owes me money. He's got to pay me back. And we now have to try and override that with all the other things in our lives. And that becomes, in my opinion, probably the last resort that I would go after is that if I just very much had to do it. Last resort.
Yeah, that one seems like that one's risking emotional and mental health and relationships. So
Have
So
you
that can
much.
ever
be a really invaluable thing to lose. So,
have you ever done it?
Yes, I have.
How was it?
I've both lent and I've borrowed. I haven't borrowed, quite frankly, much from family, but I did borrow some money from family. I had them invest with me, so I invested and they invested
Yeah.
in the Pacific Swing, and we all lost. And
Oh,
it was difficult because I had to go back to them and I had to apologize. Not a fun thing.
mm, that sounds like overwhelming.
There's one other thing I didn't add, so we need to change it from 7 secrets to 8 secrets.
eight,
That
six.
is partnership. We didn't
Okay.
talk about a partner. You can always bring in a partner. I will tell you, there are a lot of pitfalls to bringing in a partner because every time you bring in a partner, you now have a second set of ears and a second set of eyes, and that's a good thing. But the other problem is that means you also have a second opinion, and you have to deal with that opinion along with everything else. And the opinions become important because then the partnership's going, wait, I've put in more time than you. I've put more effort than you. I've put in more money than you. And now you've got to constantly not just be dealing with the advantages and the disadvantage to having that partner strength. You've also got to now be accountable to that person. And I will tell you, that's where you start to build resentments. People start to resent, hey, I'm putting in more time than he is. I'm doing more
Mhm.
effort than he is. And so I will tell you this, partners, I didn't even list it on my list because I would say never have a partner unless you absolutely have to. I've done partnerships and I've not done partnerships. That second partner can be a real positive. That second partner can be a real negative. One of those things where you've got to weigh the options very, very carefully. So give me your quick takeaways.
I mean, for me, I definitely have a few things to look into that are already accessible for me right now. I think that's the cool thing with what we've talked about is some of this stuff is really actually pretty easy to look into and get without feeling like it's this big hurdle or mountain to climb to prepare yourself to get it. So, like HELOC for me is something I definitely want to look into. And yeah, lots of options.
Cool.
Yeah. Kind of adding to that too, I feel like a lot of people don't realize how many options there are. People either go to automatically their savings account that they've taken years and years of time to invest for themselves, or they'll go to their local credit union and only get like up to $5,000 even in business lines because they feel like they have to do business credit in order to start their business when there's so many options out there. I mean, this is 8 options right here versus someone who's just starting and thinking they only have 2 or 3 options available.
I think that's great too, because even going back to our previous episodes about vision, and obviously, I think one of the top things you think of when you think of a business idea is, oh, this sounds great. This is awesome. And then instantly you're like, I don't have money to start it. Like that's an instant kind of red tape that you feel like is going to be a huge hurdle to get past.
Complete
When
stopper.
really,
Yep.
yeah, when really it's actually, there's so many options that actually make it an easy next step.
Absolutely. That's why I wanted to touch on vision very beginning because it really is a complete matter of focusing on that part because with that, all everything else is possible. It's just trying to figure it out.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in to Business Secrets with our millionaire dad.